Welcome back. We're going to talk again about the Second Amendment because it is, as always, one of the more contentious areas of the law here in the United States. And you might remember, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that I discussed Joe Biden's ATF pick, David Chipman, who has recommended banning the AR-15. And it looks like it's going to be a little bit more difficult for supporters of such a policy to push it through at the federal level for the moment, because there was a major ruling at the district level in Southern California where California's assault weapons ban, which has been in place since the early 1990s, is being overturned pending, of course, appeal. So those of you that are ready to, throw confetti and say, "Oh, it's over. There's not going to be any assault weapons banned," well, remember the Ninth Circuit is where Southern California is located. It's generally not considered a pro Second Amendment court, but if the reasoning behind the ruling is clear enough, it's even possible that the Ninth Circuit could uphold the ruling. And that would be a tremendous black eye for the state of California and its efforts to be one of those jurisdictions where there is tougher enforcement of laws limiting firearms. So, this was, of course, the LA Times article. It says, after judge overturns California assault weapons ban, state officials vow to fight back. Families of mass shooting victims, gun control advocates, and California officials condemned a federal judge's decision to overturn California's 30-year-old ban on assault weapons, largely because of the manner in which he justified his ruling. So it's using the backdrop of the San Bernardino weapons that were purchased in approaching the incident in 2015. If you don't remember, in 2015, a couple, I think they were Bangladeshi, they perpetrated the San Bernardino shooting in the name of ISIS. In declaring the ban unconstitutional late Friday, U.S. District Judge Roger Benitez compared the AR-15 semi-automatic rifle to a Swiss Army knife, calling it good for both home and battle. Benitez, who was nominated by former President George W. Bush and serves in the Southern District of California, issued a permanent injunction against the law's enforcement, but stayed it for 30 days to give the state a chance to appeal. California is one of 7 states, plus Washington, D.C., that ban assault weapons, according to the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. In his 94-page ruling, Benitez wrote that it was unlawful for California to prohibit its citizens from possessing weapons permitted in most other states and allowed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Advocates for the right to bear arms hailed the ruling. This is by far the most fact-intensive, detailed judicial opinion on this issue ever, said David Kopel, an adjunct professor of constitutional law at the University of Denver, an adjunct scholar at libertarian think tank, the Cato Institute. By the way, the Cato Institute, for those of you that are not aware, has largely been very anti-Trump because they're pro-open borders, they're pro-illegal immigration. They don't want there to be such thing as illegal immigration because they think that you should just be able to walk over the border. So it's not as if you're talking about a topic where there's just a clear line between, both parties and everything. There's certainly people who are of different attitudes within the Democratic and Republican parties regarding gun control. State Attorney General Rob Bonta called the decision fundamentally flawed and said he would appeal. So, should there be a different ruling on appeal, I hope that I remember to make a video about it. By the way, if you're not already subscribed on one of the alternative platforms, find me below. You can see I'm on BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey so that you don't miss a video. There's no sound basis in law, fact, or common sense for equating assault rifles with Swiss Army knives, especially on Gun Violence Awareness Day, and after the recent shootings in our own California communities, Bonta said in a statement. Well, as a matter of fact, so there is ample reason to criticize the fact that we have, there's so many people who have been shot in these incidents, but whether it's an assault weapons ban that could have prevented it is ridiculous. Okay.
Good evening to our viewers in the West, and thank you for joining us. We are going to begin tonight with breaking news.
So the gentleman who committed the crime in San Jose, I shouldn't call him a gentleman, but I don't want to say his name. He didn't use an assault weapon. He used 2 semi-automatic handguns and 11 magazines. So those of you that are out there and you favor what is called common sense gun control among advocates like Michael Bloomberg and the Giffords campaign and Everytown for Gun Safety, and there's a number of other ones, realize that this guy, he committed this crime largely in compliance with what people would call common sense gun control. 2 semi-automatic handguns. That means that they're 2 magazine-loaded handguns with 11 magazines. So that would suggest that he complied with the high-capacity magazine ban of California, meaning that people had always said, oh, if we give people high-capacity magazines, they can just kill as many people as possible. Well, he was still able to fire 39 shots. That would suggest, depending which firearm he was using, that he was able to use either 5 or 3 magazines out of the 11 that he had. And that is really what I'm trying to get across here, that you could enforce, you could try to, I guess, pass an assault weapons ban. And I am certain that the day after, many people would wake up and they'd be like, oh, I think we live in a much safer world. In reality, you don't live in a much safer world. People with ill intent have that ill intent. They want to commit the crime. The means of committing the crime are secondary to the motive. So if you ban one type of rifle, they'll go for another. If you ban all rifles, they'll go for handguns. If you ban all other types of guns, they'll end up creating explosive devices. And this is something that's happened over and over again. You can go to other countries where there is no, there's no right to bear arms. Last time I did a chat, and Arjun was in the chat, and he was talking about India, where there is no right to bear arms. But there still are acts of violence and terrorism there, as well as petty crime and petty and violent crime day to day. Because the truth is that having a law in the books does not, in and of itself, mean that the law will be enforced, nor that it can be enforced, right? Enforcing a law is really up to both the authorities and the society that is governed by the law in order for it to be effective. And if neither of them, if just one of them is not there, then it's very difficult to justify, right? If you have a society where people are complying with the law but authorities are not enforcing it, well, that's probably the best. People voluntarily decide to comply with the law. I'm all for voluntarism. And if the majority of people decided, well, we're not going to keep and bear arms, we just don't want to, well, all it takes is one person not to comply with the law, right? Now, let's say that you have tough enforcement of the law but non-compliance of the law. Then you have basically conditions that are ripe for mass civil disturbance. That's the reason that the drug war has wreaked such damage on the American people for so many years. So I just want people to be aware that I'm not telling you that you're wrong for wanting there to be less deaths, and that's why you support harsher gun control. But it isn't going to work. The reality is that this ruling that was arrived at by Judge Benitez actually explains a little bit why. Um, so last month, a gunman opened fire at a light rail yard in. So all I had to do was keep reading. Sorry, but I hadn't read the entire article. He opened fire at a light rail yard in San Jose, killing 9 coworkers and dying of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Officials said he was armed with 3 semi-automatic 9mm handguns. So there you go, 3 semi-automatic 9mm handguns. But he's compliant, and 32 high-capacity magazines loaded with additional ammunition. So that's a different account. But you have to really, I mean, let's dig deep here, okay? 32 high-capacity magazines for a 9mm pistol. Most of them that have high capacity, it's not that many, but they'll tip, like the most you'll usually see is 15. I seem to be around ones that have a limit of 7. So it could even mean that they have a high capacity of 9 or 10. So it's really a very vague definition. And again, he fired 39 shots. He didn't end up firing all of these rounds from all the magazines, simply because it probably would have taken too long. And then this goes on a non sequitur. It says AR-15s have been used in some of the nation's deadliest mass shootings, including the attack on Orlando's Pulse nightclub that killed 49 people in 2016 and one in Las Vegas that killed 58 people in 2017. So the focus on the AR-15 is largely irrelevant here. The AR-15, I believe, is banned in California. It is defined as an assault weapon. So what difference does that make? Although now I guess they're saying, well we're going to legalize it, right? So is this supposed to mean that there is going to be more mass shootings? I mean, you had San Bernardino, that was a mass shooting in California, and you also have this most recent one at the San Jose's Valley Transit Authority. And to bring up the Pulse nightclub shooting, that's one where the authorities had several red flags regarding the gunman, regarding Omar Mateen, I believe his name was. He was somebody who showed up frequently on the radar as a dangerous person, and yet the authorities did nothing. And that's really something that people also forget, that you have some of these laws that are supposed to be a panacea, and yet again the enforcement is not there. The enforcement. Moving on. So the ruling is called Miller versus Bonta, or Miller v. Bonta. I don't remember how people say it. And he includes. So I would say that Benitez strikes me as certainly a pro Second Amendment judge, if there ever was one. And he says, the Second Amendment elevates above all other interests the right of law-abiding, responsible citizens to use arms in defense of hearth and home. According to Heller versus D.C., the Supreme Court clearly holds that the Second Amendment protects guns commonly owned by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. At the same time, the Second Amendment confers an individual right to keep and bear arms that, quote, have some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. And though the Supreme Court cautioned that the Second Amendment does not guarantee a right to keep and bear and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose, Heller and other lower courts have often cited this proviso about extreme cases to justify gun laws in certain average contexts. There is no evidence that the Supreme Court intended that language to be a license to avoid its common sense holding in average contexts. Unfortunately, Heller's acknowledgement of exception for gun laws at the extreme is in danger of swallowing Heller's rule for the average case. This case is not about extraordinary weapons lying at the outer limits of Second Amendment protection. This is what he's saying. The banned assault weapons are not bazookas, howitzers, or machine guns. Those arms are dangerous and solely useful for military purposes. And you can even argue, so this is me paraphrasing here, they have very specific uses within military context. You're not going to use a howitzer to defend your house. Now, I mean, it'd be kind of cool if you did, but you're not going to, right? I mean, if you're in the chat and you intend to do it, let me just say I'll probably watch the video, but that's not what it means. Instead, the firearms deemed assault weapons are fairly ordinary, popular modern rifles. This is an average case about average guns used in average ways for average purposes. One is to be forgiven if one is persuaded by news media and others that the nation is awash with murderous AR-15 assault rifles. The facts, however, do not support this hyperbole, and facts matter. Federal Bureau of Investigation murder statistics do not track assault rifles, but they do show that killing by knife attack is far more common than murder by any kind of rifle. In California, murder by knife occurs 7 times more often than murder by rifle. For example, according to FBI statistics for 2019, California saw 252 people murdered with a knife, while 34 people were killed with some type of rifle, not necessarily an AR-15. A Californian is 3 times more likely to be murdered by an attacker's bare hands, fists, or feet than by his rifle. In 2018, the statistics were even more lopsided as California saw only 24 murders by some type of rifle. The same pattern can be observed across the nation. So the one thing I do want to say is I am a little concerned that this ruling could read a little bit too much like a position paper as opposed to a legal opinion. I'm not really first of all, I'm not a lawyer, and second of all, I just have some casual experience reading through some of these court rulings and other legal documents. So I'm not sure if this is really something that would be common in legal circles, but nonetheless, it's pretty clear that this judge is laying out a very strong and passionate case that when you have so many people who own an AR-15 and are carrying it and using it in everyday life, it isn't really something that you can justify limiting by the use of these provisions where there is room for gun control, such as the assault weapons ban. So, another issue that I think we need to discuss is Jonathan Turley. So he sort of piggybacks on this. Jonathan Turley is one of the more famous constitutional scholars in the country. He's pretty amazing sometimes hearing him talk. I know that some people might be like, well, why do we have to listen to these eggheads? I can read the Constitution plainly, but sometimes you need people to sort of make the core arguments much more digestible for people, and I think Jonathan Turley does that. He is, like Alan Dershowitz, one of the more well-known constitutional scholars out there, and he says for many years that this is with Fox News. So years ago, it would have been inconceivable that Turley would have been on Fox News. He's a liberal. He was an Obama supporter. He had, for many years, believed that it was, he's opposed the Bush administration and its extraordinary expansion of the state surveillance apparatus and everything like that. So he's certainly not one to be overly partisan, at least not through his longer track record. So he said, for many years there has been a growing disconnect between political promises and constitutional realities in the area of gun control. Politicians have run on promises of sweeping gun control legislation that would clearly violate controlling case law under the Second Amendment. After every mass shooting, politicians pledge that they will get guns out of society when they know that such promises mislead voters on the range of permissible action in the area. Despite the columns of many legal experts that range from legislative action is quite limited. That range of legislative action is quite limited, as shown last week when a federal judge struck down California's 3-decade-old ban on assault weapons as a violation of the Second Amendment. The decision could be raised in the ongoing consideration of the nomination of David Chipman, who President Joe Biden wants to head the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. In Miller versus Bonta, U.S. District Judge Roger Benitez of San Diego found that the ban on weapons like the AR-15 are based on both a misunderstanding of the weapons and a misinterpretation of the Constitution. Claims surrounding the AR-15 are often detached from comparative realities of this and other weapons. The AR-15 and other weapons in its class use an intermediate cartridge that actually is less powerful than that used in a rifle. The appeal of guns like the AR-15 is due to the fact that they are modular and allow for different grips and barrels. Benitez noted many of the same issues in his decision. He held that the ban cannot satisfy any level of heightened scrutiny. He notes that the popularity of the AR-15 is due to its versatility. In the one controversial line of the opinion, he observed, like the Swiss Army knife, the popular AR-15 rifle is a perfect combination of home defense weapon and homeland defense weapon, good for both home and battle. The problem is that many politicians, like California Governor Gavin Newsom, opposed the decision of the Supreme Court in 2008 in District Columbia versus Heller, affirming the right to bear arms as an individual right under the Second Amendment. The court has repeatedly reaffirmed that landmark decision. In 2010, the court ruled that this constitutional right applies to the states as it does to the federal government, since it is one of those fundamental rights necessary to our system of ordered liberty. These cases are controlling, as politicians and commentators are fully aware. Benitez noted the Heller test asks, is a modern rifle commonly owned by law-abiding citizens for a lawful purpose? For the AR-15 type rifle, the answer is yes. The overwhelming majority of citizens who own and keep the popular AR-15 rifle and its many variants do so for lawful purposes, including self-defense at home. Under Heller, that is all that is needed. Under the Heller test, judicial review can end right here. And he continues, this is only the latest major ruling by Benitez in the area. In 2017, he struck down the state's nearly 2-decades-old ban on the sales and purchases of magazines holding more than 10 bullets. As recently discussed, the Ninth Circuit upheld his decision, which is now scheduled to be reheard by an 11-member panel. These cases have a very strong chance for review before the Supreme Court, given the division across the country and the 6-3 conservative majority on the court. So that's also questionable given Roberts, but I don't even think John Roberts would oppose sustaining that decision. The decision could have some ramifications in the pending nomination of Chipman as director of the ATF. Chipman is a former ATF special agent and senior policy advisor for the gun control organization Giffords. In his hearing, Chipman declared, with respect to the AR-15, I support a ban as it has been presented in a Senate bill and supported by the president. The AR-15 is a gun I was issued on ATF's SWAT team. It's a particularly lethal weapon, and regulating it as other particular lethal weapons I have advocated for. Chipman was confronted on the definition of what constitutes an assault rifle. He told the Senate that the ATF defines an assault rifle as any semi-automatic rifle capable of accepting a detachable magazine above the caliber of .22, which would include a .223, which is, largely the AR-15 round. That would include a wide array of weapons. Indeed, a statement by Benitez may resonate with some senators. This case is not about extraordinary weapons lying at the outer limits of Second Amendment. So he repeats the whole thing with the howitzers that I said earlier. In fairness to Chipman, he made clear that he would enforce whatever the federal law prescribes in terms of any ban or the underlying definitions. However, he is viewed as an outspoken advocate for banning ownership of weapons like the AR-15, which was just declared as protected by this court. These are difficult policies and difficult cases. Reasonable people can disagree, including on the meaning of the Second Amendment. What is troubling is the level of misleading and frankly disingenuous discussion of the issue. The public is constantly being told that electing certain politicians will result in sweeping gun control when the current case law directly contradicts such assertions. That was the case in the 2020 Democratic debates, where candidates made unsupportable claims and promises. For example, now President Joe Biden attacked Senator Bernie Sanders over a vote that had favored the gun industry. Biden declared that since the vote, 150 million Americans had been killed by guns. When people asked the campaign about roughly half of our population dying in gun violence, it said the number was probably more like 150,000. Nevertheless, many of the candidates promised massive changes. Biden declared, "I want to tell you, if I'm elected, NRA, I'm coming for you, and gun manufacturers, I'm going to take you on, and I'm going to beat you." So we'll see if that happens. Beto O'Rourke ran on the issue and most famously declared, "Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. Biden later declared that he would make O'Rourke a type of gun czar for his nomination. Such hell yes moments are likely to continue with the approaching 2022 election, but they may meet more judges who say hell no in constitutional challenges." So that's I think a great way to sum it up. We're talking about a major watershed moment if this continues. If it becomes clear that even in California, federal courts are invalidating their state gun control laws, then the movement that has been largely bankrolled by people like, sources, but also Michael Bloomberg and many other very opinionated billionaires, that movement could start to fragment because they're losing really in the courts. They're not losing necessarily, and also in the polls in some cases, right? When I'm talking about the actual voting polls, not the opinion polls. So we're talking about really this moment when reality bursts through the dam of media disinformation. If you are a person who is used to supporting these gun control measures, you have to sort of step outside of your comfort zone a little bit and realize why people own some of these weapons. It may surprise you in some cases. Yes, there are people who own the AR-15 simply because they're looking to, by the way, they do own it to hunt. There are people who own it just in order to go to the range and show off. They might not have a practical reason to own it. That does not invalidate their right to own it, by the way. So me just having something for my own personal entertainment and gratification, even if it is something that's not exactly, harmless. The AR-15 certainly is not harmless. I'd never say that, but there are many other people. The opposite case. They live in a rural area, places in the wilds of Pennsylvania, or in there's, if you look across the landscape of the country, whether it's a state like Arkansas or Missouri or Louisiana, where there aren't that many people, if you're in trouble, whether it's from another person or from wildlife, you don't have the luxury of just calling the police or calling even a ranger to come help you. You might need a lethal firearm in order to help. And by the way, a long rifle, including the AR-15, is more useful than a handgun in that situation. There are people who carry handguns in case they're attacked at close range. But it's well known, whether you have a military background or a hunting background or law enforcement, that long guns are more accurate and they help often to save lives, whereas handguns are, they are a method of self-defense, but the further you are away from the threat, the harder it is for you to accurately dispatch it. So if you are a supporter of gun control, you're directly jeopardizing the safety of certain people who live in rural areas, right? In terms of urban areas, the majority of crimes are not committed with assault weapons anyway. So I'm not going to delude you. I'm not going to deceive you by saying these are harmless weapons. Remember that, of course, there's people who live in many houses. They may be children, or they may have mental issues, or they may be, they may be older with dementia, issues like that. I would never make the claim that every person should have an AR-15 or every person should have a firearm. But I would argue that most Americans are of sound mind and sound body, and they should have the choice. They should have the choice whether to exercise this right or not. So that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on all these other platforms below: BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey. You can also follow me on Gab and Minds. You can send me your support through Subscribestar, and also I believe through BitChute for crypto. So that's about it. We'll talk later, and enjoy your Monday.